Hey everybody, welcome back to the Garage Built. Today we are working on my 1966 Ford LTD, getting it ready for power tour. In the last episode, we ripped apart this engine bay down to the long block. In this one, we're going to start putting it back together. Up until now, I've started cleaning this engine. I got a bunch of the oil off the front. I also took the intake out and detailed and cleaned that up a little bit. I'll show you that in a little bit. But for now, let's get started. So earlier today, I took some time and we went over the whole intake, cleaned it up, and just gave it a quick once over. Started out by coming outside. We cleaned up all the mating surfaces across both sides, passenger side, driver side, and the lip front and back where it sits on the block against the valley. While it was off, I noticed that there was some staining back here. I've since gone and cleaned it off, but it was obviously fuel and oil residue. So a lot of it was coming from this fitting up top. So this is a factory threaded port on the intake, and I have a tree coming off that. So this nipple here goes to my distributor vacuum advance down the side, and then over here I have one for my accessories, and one goes to my automatic transmission. And then this cap here is where you would have an optional, like a PCV breather. And normally if you just have one fitting, you'd loop it in. But I have a second spacer here that I put the port because it was drawing too much vacuum off this one for my accessories to run. So we stacked it, we got a 1-inch spacer, and then I have a fitting here. My valve cover will sit here, and then there's a cap over here on the side with a line. It's actually in the back. The cap right here with the line that comes over, and it feeds in for my PCV. So we got that all cleaned up. I re-gasketed this. All these leaking ones, this one was leaking, but to take it out I had to take this off and this off. So while those are off, I resealed those as well. So these are all sealed now. They shouldn't leak. A trick an old timer taught me on intakes in general: you got bolts obviously that hold your intake on, but those bolts go through to the other side, as you can see, and oil can come back up through these and stain your intake, which might have been what happened here. I'm not sure exactly. Regardless, you can take a dot of RTV or silicone or whatever you use and put it on the end of each bolt or washer, and it'll seal against that and keep anything coming up, and keeps your engine sealed and keeps anything coming back up and out. Oh, almost forgot. Threw a fresh coat of paint on my oil fill. So this is just black enamel, self-leveling. Good gloss to it. So like I said, this is good, ready to go back on now. So sooner than later, this will make its way out back onto the engine. This is what I will be using for my intake gaskets. It's a Velpro Performance part number 1247S-3. These are steel core gaskets. You can see the cross section in there, if I get this to focus. And they have a little silicone bead around each port. So they'll go in there, they'll squish, and then this should help in sealing everything off. I was doing when I was cleaning this off on the sides, I was investigating why we had a leak, and I think it was on the intake side of the gasket. It was bubbling up between the intake and the gasket up through into the oil. So I just kind of put a leveling coat of a Performance RTV sealant, and then this should seal it against that now. So hopefully we don't have any issues going forward. So I don't know if you remember, but when we pulled the intake off, a lot of water came out and went everywhere. So I have to do an oil change on this before we really fire it off. Before we even start assembling though, I'm going to, down on all of my lifters, I'm going to put a dollop of engine assembly grease. That way when we start this, we don't have any dry starts. Main reason being, I wiped everything down clean, soaked up all the water and oil that was spilled. So this will protect those at least before we kick this off. Next, we've got to put our valley pan on. I always forget which way this goes. I think we'll try this way. That looks right. It fits in the back against the notches and the front's open so you don't interfere with the distributor. I just wanted to explain some of the stuff I just did. So first I put the gaskets on around the exhaust crossover. I put on some high heat silicone, the tube of which I just threw away because it was sealed up at the top. I had to cut it open in the middle. But the goal was to use a high heat copper based RTV around each of those ports to protect the gasket. I put the paper gaskets on, which are steel cord. On either corner, I pressed a dollop of RTV in. I pressed the gasket into it and then put another dollop on top of each corner. And then rather than using the cork front and back valley gasket, which are prone to leaking, I used another 1/4 inch bead of high performance RTV, and I let that set. And then I went around, torqued each one up to the torque spec. The manual doesn't include a spec for an aluminum intake. The specs are based off of steel. So for an aluminum, you don't need as high of a torque value. So I believe the torque spec is around 30 PSI on a torque wrench, which is what I did this to. I believe Edelbrock has an aluminum intake guide on their website that you can reference if you want a more exact value. So that's that there. So that's all set. I have to let this cure now. Another thing, I mentioned the torque spec was 30. So the torque is obviously very important, but equally important is your torque sequence, what order you torque everything down. And each manufacturer of each engine has a recommended torque sequence. Mine is included in my shop manual. I'll try to put this on camera for you. So here it is. So you go center passenger side, center driver side, and then etc. 1 through 10 until you get everything spec'd. I started at 20, then I went to 25, and then 30. Kind of do a sequential tightening, with the intent being that you're following this pattern and evenly compressing the gaskets on either side in that silicone bead. So there you go. I don't know if you can see those. I mentioned before, label all your connecting rods, or push rods rather, my bad. And there you go. So the numbers are all on the top, and then each number has a spot. Driver's side is 1 through 8, passenger side is 9 through 16. With these, it's tough to know when they're actually lined up in the bottom. So what I do when I push them in is I go, feel I line it up, and then if I give it a little tug up, I can feel the lifter come up with it. I know it's seated and locked in to its spot in the lifter. So. Now I'm also going to go and put a dollop of the grease on all of these, the valve tops and my push rods. And then, as mentioned before, also I put a zip tie on my passenger side rocker arm. No zip tie inside, so it's the driver's side. And then obviously when you put these on, make sure that each of these sits into each machine little bevel in each rocker arm assembly. Almost forgot, there's a little valley pan under each one of these. Now when you put your rocker arm assemblies on, there is a solid rod that goes through all of these. So you don't want to just tighten one down and then tighten the next one and the next one. You want to kind of hit each one evenly with even pressure so you tighten it down so you don't bend anything. So I'm going to go like 2 cranks on each until it's all snug down, and then I'll torque it. Here's where we're at. We've got our intake on, we got our push rods all in, we got our rocker assembly all on torqued. I'm waiting on my water pump gaskets to show up, and I'm waiting on valve cover gaskets to show up. That really limits us to what we can put on right now. Technically I could put the carburetors on, but I'm afraid to put those on with the valve covers open right now. So I think for tonight, I'm going to hold off until something else shows up. If the water pump gaskets show up next, we can put the accessories on the front. If the valve cover gaskets show up next, we can put the carburetors on and everything on the top. But until then, I'm really kind of at a gridlock right now, so they're going to pause for tonight. So it's the next day, and my valve cover gasket showed up. So we can start putting this back together on the top. I'll put these on. I'm going to put a little bit of silicone RTV on the top mating surfaces here just to really seal them in, and then I'll go and put my carburetors on and maybe the distributor. So get started. So I was getting ready to put the carburetors back on, but I was thinking about it, and I was still changing the jets on the carburetors throughout the year, trying to get them a little closer to where they should be. So I think what I'm going to do before I put them on is pull my spark plugs and see how they look, white, tan, or black, and use that to determine if my jetting is good. If all looks good, I'll put them back in. If they don't look great, or there's a couple that are off, I'll put fresh plugs in, and I'll adjust the jetting on the carburetors and try to get this running a little bit cleaner. So we'll do that next, or I'll do that next off camera. The way I like to do the spark plugs, or I found best to do the spark plugs, is I write up a little sheet like so, and I create a scale from white to black, 1 through 5, and I have my cylinders all numbered 1 through 8, with the front being the fan. And I'll go through, and as I pull each spark plug, I'll rate it, where 3 is my perfect fuel mixture, so it'll be running nice and tan. And then 1 is your one extreme of being white, not enough fuel. 5 is your other extreme of being blackened or sooted out from running way too rich. And then I can go through and figure out what jets need to go where. The way these works, these tri-powers, your middle carburetor is like half of your pedal. So as you're coming down from idle, you're giving it gas, you're running on just the middle carburetor. And then as you get deeper and deeper, from like 50 to 75%, I think, don't quote me on this, the back one opens first, and then from 75 to 100, where you get wide open throttle, your front one opens last. So your center carburetor plays the biggest role in how all your spark plugs are doing. And then this affects the back ones more, this affects the front ones more. So to lay everything out and see how it's running is a good way to figure out where it's at and where you have to make adjustments. So that's my little trick. So here's what we're seeing. On the whole, we're a little bit rich, but not bad except for the front. My front plugs were like snow white. I'll show them to you real quick. Take a look. These are like brand new. Never been run pretty much. This one's maybe a little dark. Maybe that would have been like a 1 1/4 instead of a 1. But on the whole, extremely lean compared to the others. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to upsize the jets in the front carburetor, so that way we're getting more fuel in the idle circuit in the front all the time. And I think the back ones I'm going to leave the same for now. Once I run this more and I take it out and have it tuned, I'll have a better idea of where it's at. I think these plugs are still pretty fresh, so it's tough to know for sure. But I think these front ones definitely need to come up for now. That'll be a good starting point. So I'll do that, and then we'll throw these carburetors on. This is that aluminum spacer I had mentioned earlier. So this has a drilled and tapped hole in the back with a spline fitting on it that accepts this hose, and then this sits on under the carburetor, and on this end it wraps around and hooks to that there PCV valve. So that's our PCV system. know I mentioned it when I was filming the teardown episode, but I don't know if I kept it in the final edit. So you'll notice these little flags I put on the front and back carburetor. You probably can't see it from your angle in the lighting, but this one has a 1 on it, this one has a 3 on it. The reason I labeled these are jetted differently, front and back. That's why I was able to know which one was the front and which one needed the bigger jets when I saw the spark plugs. So again, even though they look very similar, they are not the same. So you can't just pop this one and put it there and vice versa. So note. Well guys, I think we're going to wrap it up here for tonight. I just went online and checked. It looks like my water pump gaskets have a couple days before they'll be here. So I think we're going to pretty much leave it where it sits until those come in. So got the intake on, like we said. Rocker arms are all in. Carburetors are all on, tight. Our air cleaner is on, so nothing will fall in now. So I think now it's just a waiting game until everything shows up and we can put our water pump on and alternator and power steering pump. So I think we're going to wrap it up here for tonight, probably for this episode too, and follow up later when everything else comes in. Thank you all for watching and hanging out. If you have any questions, like always, leave them below. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.